To all who shall see these presents, greetings. Ruckdog back with another video. So this one is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit of an event overview. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I had going on earlier this year. And I want to just sort of cover some of my experiences with these events and maybe give you a little bit of kind of on the street reporting type of stuff from a naval gamer's perspective. Now, the two events I want to talk about are a Star Wars Armada tournament I participated in way back in January at this point. So yes, I know it's the better part of a year since it happened. Just roll with it, right? This is how it goes when I tend not to have a lot of time to make videos. And then the other thing I want to talk about is Richmond Open, which still happened a good while ago, but it's a bit more recent. That was the first weekend in May. All right, so let's talk about the Star Wars Armada tournament first. As I mentioned, this took place in January 2024. It was a small local tournament. There was a total of 4 of us that were playing, including me. And we had it at one of the local game stores here, specifically the Virginia Beach location for Tower of Games, which is one of 2 local game store chains in the area. We are definitely kind of spoiled when it comes to that kind of stuff. Now, this was a standard, 400 point type of tournament. And since we had 4 of us, it worked out that we could do 3 rounds, and that would allow every player to play every other player. Now, at this event, I played Jared, who is somebody I hadn't played prior to this, and Nathan, who was someone else who I had also never played prior to this, and my friend Chris, who had been my regular Star Wars Armada opponent up to this point. So this was, in some ways, a great opportunity for me to try and play against some new people, meet some new people and play against them, and have a little more variety when it comes to the games I was playing. So let's talk a little bit about my lists. Now, I could probably do an entire video on my approach to tournament and tournament list building in particular, and list building in general. List building is not one of my great strengths, and I think I'm doubly challenged by the fact that I tend to bounce around different games a lot. I don't play a single game over and over again or continuously. As a matter of fact, it's somewhat unusual for me to play the same game twice in a row. So that is a extra layer of challenge because I don't have as much experience in any one game, and Star Wars Armada is no exception. But coming into this tournament, I decided to run an Admiral Akbar list, and that was because this is the commander that I had used for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 games prior to the tournament, so I had a little bit of experience with how he works, and he's also a relatively strong commander inside the game. Now, for those of you that aren't initiated into the ways of Star Wars Armada, let me briefly explain. Admiral Akbar has a special ability that basically gives him the ability to buff the broadside shooting for the ships in his fleet. And that's handy because the rebels have a number of ships that are very well equipped on the broadside, shall we say, including my flagship, the MC-80 assault cruiser. This ship has some very powerful and long-range broadsides. Having Admiral Akbar on there definitely was a benefit. Same thing with the assault frigate, Mark II. And then the Corvette and the medium transports, those were more of a... So basically the Corvette, I wanted to have a fast option I could use to chase objectives down or sweep up stragglers, etc. And then the medium transports, that was a way to sort of buff the limited number of squadrons I was taking. As you can see, I did take squadrons, but I didn't take a ton of squadrons. I took a couple of aces, the Green Squadron and Luke Skywalker, and then just some standard X-Wings and A-Wings to sort of round out the list. This was a little bit of an unhappy middle ground, as it turns out, and we'll get into that a little bit. But this is one thing that I've sort of struggled with in this game, is figuring out what type of squadrons to take and how many. I feel like I still haven't quite gotten that part of the list building for Armada nailed down. As you can see, I came out to almost 400 points on the dot. And again, for those of you that are uninitiated into Star Wars Armada, in general, the player that has fewer points is the one that's going to get initiative, and also the one that's going to be able to pick the objective. And so those 3 objectives you see down there at the bottom of my list, those turned out to be the ones that we actually played. All right, so now I'm going to go into a little bit of a game-by-game quick summary. I don't have super great notes, and this was, 8 months ago at this point, so I don't have a lot of detail on each individual game, but I'll try and give you a quick overview, something less than a full battle report, but hopefully it'll still be satisfying nonetheless. All right, so the first game was up against Jared, and for this one, we actually used the VIP mission that you saw on the previous screen. That's what the little objective marker there, sort of in the center of this picture, is for. As you can see, he ran an Imperial list. Don't be fooled, by that Venator. I was schooled by the Venator, but don't be fooled by it. He was taking that as an Imperial Venator based off of the Rapid Reinforcements print and play material that has been released for the game. So as you can see, I tried to start off working through my strengths by maximizing my broadside firepower and sort of daring him to close into my broadside range. And my thought was I could scoop up that objective token with my CR-90 Corvette and then hopefully speed off into the sunset with it. As it turns out, that didn't quite happen. What ended up actually happening is that I wound up losing all of my ships to no gain. And so it was a pretty bloody battle. It was basically a 428-point swing for Jared there. Jared turns out to be a great guy, but he's also like the best player in the game, I think. Or player in the area, I should say. At least the one that I've played. He's a Star Wars Armada expert. This is his main game. He plays this game and this game alone, and he's been playing it since it came out. So very tough opponent, but a very good one to play because he knows the rules really well. And he knows all the combos really well. And he's very, very free with helping you out on suggestions for list building and tips and tricks on things that you could do to make your list stronger and so on. So definitely had a great time playing him. Next up I played was Nathan. And I think this is actually a shot from the game that we played with him. He also ran an Imperial list. I had a little bit better luck with him this time. We were doing the Advanced Gunnery mission, and I actually managed to pull out a modest win against us by about 200 points. So it was probably my best game I had all day here was this middle game. Nathan is another great opponent. Really enjoyed my game with him. I think that he and I are probably at about the same skill level or experience level when it comes to playing the game. So even though I did win, it was a narrow victory, and this felt like it was the closest game that we played all day. And then last up, I played Chris. Now, Chris had a very similar Rebel list to mine. I actually forget at this point what Admiral he had. But you can see from the picture here, he ran a ton more squadrons than I did. So not only did he run more squadrons, he ran more aces, and he ran a lot more rogues. Now, in Star Wars Armada, normally your fighters can either move or shoot, but rogues have the fancy ability where they can move and shoot, so that makes them a lot more flexible. Now, they pay for it. They're a lot more expensive, but they are a lot more flexible. And Chris took a lot of those special rogue squadrons, and he quickly shredded my limited fighter screen and then proceeded to harass the rest of my fleet. Now, this was another replay of the VIP mission. This ended up being a loss for me, but it was a narrow loss. It was a fairly close game. As I said, Chris is my regular opponent. He's still, in my estimation, a little bit more experienced and a little bit better drilled at the game than I am. He can eyeball certain things a lot better. And like I said, I think he's got much stronger list building skills than I do. But it was still a really fun game, and it was great to play him again. This was the first time I'd gotten a chance to play him in 24, as it turns out, because this was January. So if we're following along there, the sum result of my effort was a bad loss, a close win, and a close loss, which got me to third place overall. Now, we had a store tournament pack for our event. We had a modest buy-in, and the store sort of gave us a little bit of a discount on the tournament prize support pack, which includes things like cards with custom artwork and the like. And so everybody got to go home with something. Sort of, whether you were first place or fourth place, you got to go home with something. And so I had a nice stack of upgrade cards with some unique and fancy artwork on it, and I was very happy with that. This was a great time. So I am not a super big tournament player in this. I enjoy them, but I don't play them a lot. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to rack my brain here. I think the last tournament I played in before this one in January of 24 might have been a Firestorm Armada tournament at Adepticon all the way back in 2017. So I'm not exactly a constant fixture on the tournament scene, you might say. So it was fun from that perspective to get a chance to play in a slightly more competitive environment again. And it was a great group of guys and a great series of games, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that is sort of my big goal. You know, I never go into a tournament from the perspective of I got to win, 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 and I'm going to take home first or bust, and second place is first loser and all this kind of stuff. I'm much more of a, hey, this is just an opportunity to get kind of a concentrated dose of a game that I enjoy, right? Because if you think about it, I maybe play once or twice. I maybe play Star Wars Armada once or twice a month. Well, here I got to do it 3 times in a single day. So it was a nice extra little helping of Star Wars Armada to get the year started off right. All right, so that was the first event. Let's move on to the next event, which was Richmond Open. Now, Richmond Open is a relatively young convention. I think it started 3 years ago, perhaps. And this is the second year that I've gone to it. I went back in 2023. This is a little bit of a different animal than last year because in 23, the convention was held at a convention center in downtown Richmond. And for 24, they moved it to an event center that's off by King's Dominion. If you know your I-95 corridor around Richmond and know where the big amusement park called King's Dominion is at, this was held literally right down the street from that. And I believe it was actually part of the Virginia State Fairgrounds. So a different venue, a little bit further out. It wasn't like right in a major downtown of a city where you could walk to all kinds of restaurants. However, the prices were cheaper, the venue was bigger, and we didn't have to deal with any competing events. It was kind of funny. Last year in 23 at the convention center, in the hall next door to the gaming convention, they were doing a teenage dance competition. And so you had all of these dance girls and their very confused parents wandering through a tabletop gaming convention trying to find their way to the stage. It was pretty humorous. I have no idea what they thought about a huge room full of smelly gamers, but it must have been something for him. Anyway, so I started off with the game of A Billion Suns. Now, A Billion Suns is a game we've talked about a lot on the show in the past. It is a miniatures agnostic starship combat game with a less emphasis on combat and more emphasis on sort of tactical positioning. There's an interesting economic model where you don't start with a list, you buy your ships and then field them as you go. And this was a game I played with my friend Matt, who accompanied me, and we split a hotel room this year for the event. And it was the first time I'd gotten a chance to play A Billion Suns in about a year, so we were really excited to play it. We ended up doing a mission out of the combat escalation mission pack for the game instead of one of the original economic missions. And this actually turned out to be both fun and a little challenging because I had not really done my homework before we selected a mission out of the combat expansion for the game. And so while I had lots of ships, I didn't have a lot of the right kind of ships. I had a lot of like merchant ships and we needed more of the combat ships I had left at home. But oh well. Now, if you notice here in the picture, you'll see these little acrylic rings around the stems of the ships. The reason why those are there is because this game is, as I said, a miniatures agnostic game. And therefore, you could have a ship model represent any number of different classes. You could say, okay, well, this is a monitor, and this one over here is a gunship, and this one over here is a corvette. And in theory, you could use the same exact model for all of them, or you could use any model that you want. The challenge becomes, since there's no one standard model for each ship class, it becomes kind of a challenge to keep track of what's what and which is which. And so that is where those little rings around the base come in. You see that they've got a particular type of ship in laser cut into the ring. And then when you put it around the stem of the base, that lets you know that any ship that looks like that is a ship of that class. And that worked out really well. I had those made by TNT Laserworks that do a lot of custom acrylic cutting. And they also exhibit at this convention. And so it was a great way for me to support a vendor at the convention and get some neat stuff for A Billion Suns. Later that night, played Battletech, and this is old school full Battletech, not Alpha Strike, and it was sort of a grinder where you just grabbed a mech, deployed, and you just walked around until you got finally destroyed. And so Matt has been getting me into this game, and it's a game that I'd always heard a lot about. I think I even had the 25th anniversary set that came out around 2012 or something like that. So it's a game that I've been interested in for a while, and it's been fun actually getting in to it a little bit. I don't really have any of the stuff yet. I basically borrow Matt's stuff whenever we get together to play. But yeah, it's a fun game. Definitely old school. Lots of dry erase, ticking off 20 points of armor on your center torso, and then applying critical hits and tracking heat and all this sort of stuff. But it's still a lot of fun despite the mechanics you don't see anymore. Maybe because of the mechanics you don't really see anymore. So this sort of rounded out our Friday night. Now going into Saturday, we played a game of Polyversal and set that up. So Polyversal is another game that you may have heard me discuss a little bit. It's a sandbox game in that it is miniatures agnostic, but it has some very detailed unit creation rules built into the rules. And even better, those detailed unit creation rules have been semi-automated into a website that is called the Polyversal Arsenal. That's a really awesome resource for the game and makes building your own units for this game very, very easy. And it's designed for smaller scale miniatures on the order of 6mm up to maybe about 10 mil or 15 mil. And it is designed for these really expansive tactical battles. Now, this was an opportunity for me to try out some new terrain that I had been working on. These road tiles that you see here that the buildings are sitting on were ones I had 3D printed in the couple of weeks leading up to the show. So I had just gotten my new Bamboo P1S filament printer about 3 weeks before the show, and I immediately went to work furiously printing these tiles for this cityscape here that we ended up using at the convention. This was across the aisle from the booth where this game is sold by Collins Epic Wargames. And so we were sort of doing a combination demo, exhibition, and just a fun game for both of us to play. Both Matt and I backed this game to the hilt when it came out on Kickstarter, I think all the way back in 2017. And we've been playing it ever since. And this actually does bring up another topic that I want to talk about, and also sort of leads into the next thing that I'm going to discuss, which is smaller scale games. Because in Saturday evening, we shifted over from Polyversal and started playing Legions Imperialis, which is the 8mm game set in the Horus Heresy. So it's, the 10,000 years before Warhammer 40K, there was Warhammer 30K. The war was called the Horus Heresy, and these were the figures for it. And the reason why this is a topic that I want to discuss is because I've sort of, over the last couple of years, found myself enjoying the smaller scale, sort of epic scale, quote unquote, of land games. And I think part of the reason for that is because these games mesh a lot better in a campaign setting with naval games. And not the least of which because it makes a lot more sense to have an entire, platoon or company of tanks deploy out of a ship instead of a single squad. And so this is, like I said, an idea that I want to explore a little more further, maybe in a future episode. But yeah, we played lots of Legions Imperialis that weekend as well. Now, elsewhere around the convention, there was a Star Wars Armada tournament that was happening, which I did not actually participate in. I took a few pictures of that. I thought this was interesting. This was somebody who had taken a almost entirely CR90 list. He's got 6 CR90s and then the transports there. This was a interesting thing to me where the guy had done some Star Trek models to proxy some of the ships he was running, which I thought was really cool, especially since I'm more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan, if you know what I mean. And this was the scene at the tables there. So you had lots and lots of, I would have to, I think they had something like 6 or 7, at least, Star Wars Armada tables. So they must have had 12 or 14 Star Wars Armada players at the event. Definitely a healthy number. And this is why I'm so confident that even with the end of official support for the game, that the game is going to continue on for some time, just because that you have this level of interest in it, even in a relatively modest local convention setting, that I think there's going to be some ongoing attention to it for some time yet. And but other than Star Wars Armada, there really wasn't a lot of other naval gaming stuff to be seen. There was a booth there that was selling Tabletop Combat's Drop Fleet Commander, and that's another topic I'll have to get to soon because they're now doing a 2.0 edition of that game. And it's sort of one of those things where now that Star Wars Armada is no longer in official production, the Class A game space is wide open more now than ever, and I've talked about that in a couple of previous videos as well. And that's also a video that I want to do here in the near future, which is sort of a where are we at right now in terms of the Class A games market? Because the short answer to that, the too long didn't read, is not in a great place, but there are some lights at the end of the tunnel. I definitely want to talk about those. So thank you for watching. That will wrap it up. Just sort of a little bit of a quick one this time around. And I am going to do my best now that we're into the fall and we're into the wargaming season to start doing some more regular posts and regular videos, and try and get back on my self-set schedule where I want to try and get something out at least once a month if I can manage it. But we'll see how I'm going with that. I think I'll be able to hold pretty close to that. But anyway, if you had any comments about this video, or if you happen to attend any of these events like Richmond Open, I'd be happy to hear about it. Also, if you have any thoughts about playing in tournaments, or what it's like to build lists for tournaments versus building lists for friendly games, I'd be more than happy to hear about that as well. And finally, if you are also a fan of small-scale, 6, 8, 10 millimeter land games, I'd also like to hear your thoughts about how those work in a combined land, sea, or space campaign setting as well. Because I really do think there's something there, and I'd love to hear some thoughts from you guys that I can then discuss in that video, which I'll be making hopefully for too much longer. All right, well, that's it for me. Until next time, this is Ruckdog saying good luck and good hunting.